Daniel, what's up, man? Welcome to the SABM podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Scott. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and it's been good getting to know you over the last few months, watching your investor group prezos, your pitches,
Yeah,
and you've done a great job there. And I think that's how we initially got connected. But it's yeah, just excited to get to know you and learn a little bit more about your company, Curbit.
yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe just to kick things off, maybe if you want to share what Curbit is. So you're an investor and an advisor there.
Yeah.
For those that have ever ordered, takeout or something from a restaurant, right? I think your value proposition is pretty cool. But I also think too, like if you're involved in the restaurant industry, and I mean, how often have the people at the front, the hostess or the hostesses, or the people answering the phones, um, kind of didn't know like what an accurate wait time was, right? And like, oh, you want to order a pizza, and they say it's going to be an hour when really it would be 20 minutes, and then the customer hangs up and goes somewhere else. Like as an owner, I'd be pretty upset, but you kind of solved that issue, and excited here to learn a little bit more about what Curbit is and what and your role there.
Yeah, yeah. And I think best way probably is to say how I got involved with Curbit and start there where it came from, the genesis. But when I got out of the military in 2017, I joined the financial industry, specifically the credit union industry, where I'm a chief strategy officer there. And as part of that role, I oversaw facilities and our real estate strategy. And we had our commercial broker, Scott Siegel, one of the co-founders of Curbit. We were working on an innovative deal to bring Dunkin'. They're just Dunkin' now, but it used to be Dunkin' Donuts, but they're
Yeah.
officially going to bring Dunkin' in inside one of our branches because branches don't need the footprint anymore. Before, so we're like, oh, let's come up with a strategy that we can, share revenue, bring someone in, and that's how I got to know, Scott working on that deal. And a few years, and through that, we became pretty, good friends. Actually, this last week we were down surfing on Camp Pendleton. We do an annual trip down there with a few guys and surf. But Scott started to work on this idea that initially started as a virtual drive-through. So as a real estate broker in California, he saw the problem of every retail restaurant wants a drive-through. Not everybody can find the space that has a drive-through, and then also get the cities to approve the permits. And if you do have a spot that could support a drive-through, Starbucks probably already outbid you, for that location. And so his idea with his co-founder Kevin Piddick, who graduated from Stanford and had experience in the startup world, um, they came up with Curbit, which would at the time turn every single restaurant into a virtual drive-through. So you made your order through the app, and when you got to the restaurant, they would, as you were driving, they'd see where you are, it would kick off the kitchen starting to make it, and then you got in these designated parking zones, and they bring out the food. But what happened with that, especially once the pandemic hit, and this was 3 weeks before the pandemic, hit in March of 2020 when they launched it, what they really found out was that restaurants had no capacity management system. So for them to actually get them to deliver and bring it out to them, they're like, "Ah, actually, they can't do it because their kitchen and technology was not talking to each other and actually giving accurate wait times based on like real time capacity and adjustments
Mm.
that could take place." So that's actually when they sunsetted the app, and they said actually the opportunity here exists by integrating with the different technologies, kitchen display system, point of sale system. The restaurant industry is really fragmented across those technologies. So Curbit has came in and essentially they act as the air traffic controller for restaurants in understanding their actual capacity. If a bus show, a lot of point of sale system or ETA or even the delivery drivers, they rely on static historical information to make their estimates based on the future. But what Curbit actually does is sees what's happening in real time and makes adjustments based off of that. And so you're getting an accurate promise time. And what we found through our studies of it is that reorder time. Even, customers want to know that you're giving them accurate. So if it's 30, if it's 45 minutes, they're actually okay with that. What they're not okay with is being told it's 30 and then having it adjust and be 60. If it's 60 off the bat and that's what your capacity is, they want to know and make their decision to order from you there. And if you meet that promise time, reorder times, they go up, which of course helps your throughput and the amount of food that you're making at the restaurant. And so that's really the idea behind it. Like what we like to think about it as is, um, you know, airlines, when you book a ticket on an airline, you know what day and time you're ordering from. Or if you book a hotel, you know that there's a hotel room available because they tell you. You're not showing up at that restaurant or the airline and saying, I hope I get a time today, right? And so what Curbit's actually doing is saying, delivering that time to you in an accurate fashion. And then you can imagine as you start to collect all that data, the next steps, right? Because right now it's really about distribution, growing our footprint, making these minor changes, which is just understanding what their capacity is. And then from there, since we get to see everything that's going on in the kitchen, from the kitchen to play systems, the point of sale systems, to the online digital ordering, you can imagine kind of the follow-ons to that as it occurs, like order throttling, right? Like how long does it make chicken versus steak? And these are, all features, and then planning to add back the virtual drive-through at some point as well. And so Curbit definitely has expansion plans for their product offering.
Yeah, it's also probably a pretty cool tool just to kind of like understand your operation and kind of see like measure efficiency and like where there might be some potential breakdowns too, and just in with the team and like, hey, why? So it's pretty interesting, like the evolution of the product, kind of where it started, the
Yeah, when
pivot. Oh yeah, go ahead.
no, go ahead, please finish. Yeah.
Yeah, the pivot, like a lot, it's like a lot of people um don't pivot, right? They just kind of keep with the original idea, and it's like then it's just they're like banging your head against a wall for months and months and years until you eventually either stop or run out of money or whatever. But first of all, it takes a lot of courage, I think, to make the pivot, and you did. And um, and I'm excited to get into the impact and some case studies and stories that you've received from your customers as well, as far as what their feedback has been.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one of the things that you hit on too, and it was interesting. So my role has been, I was an original investor. I got to see this from the beginning, and so I've always supported them along the way, especially with introductions. I've spent a lot of time from the Naval Academy to different um, other education programs, building out my network. And so I was able to make a lot of key introductions to them, and then later on, take a more active role in helping them fundraise, and had some success with that. And one of the fundraisers, one of the people I brought on, um, uh, that supported Curbit, what he does is he actually works for different franchisees and helps them understand who are the most successful franchisees and who are maybe some of the ones that we need to phase off
Oh,
based on their operations. And what he really liked Curbit for is it's really difficult sometimes understanding what these, you've got corporate, you got franchisees, there's not sometimes a standardized input of data going on. And so they have a hard time determining what franchisees are the most successful, because sometimes franchisees, and I'm sure there's many great ones, there's probably some poor ones. Like some of the poorer ones have figured out how to maybe avoid some of the tracking systems and what goes on. And so they really have a good feel. Well, Curbit, from the perspective of maybe corporate and why we pitch to corporate, and that's really our in is through the corporate offices, is having them understand that Curbit sees everything and you can't really go, around it. The data is what the data is, and we're ingesting it all. And the reason he was so interested in it on his side was, oh, I'm going to be able to evaluate the different franchisees better, promote the ones that are actually being successful, and then try and matriculate the ones that are not as successful.
yeah.
you know,
Yeah, or even just help them, let them know that they're not as successful maybe as some of the other ones.
and
And
help. Yeah,
hey,
absolutely.
how can we share some best practices, right, to make, to optimize everybody's businesses. What is now? How long has it been in the market? Kind of this version that you're at right now. Like how long? Like
Yeah,
what
this
was like when was
version,
the first?
yeah, so March 2020 was always when it launched,
Mhm.
but it wasn't until about 2.5, years later that really the pivot, and it took some time to get there. It definitely did. I mean, that's why this is such a challenge and really hasn't been solved by anybody else first. And we're not ignorant enough to say that there couldn't be another player that comes in, but Curbit definitely has a head start in understand the relationships. The relationships have been, key between all the different providers and technology providers. So building them, getting them to trust it, and then refer Curbit um, for us. It did take a little bit to get to that point and investment of building up the infrastructure. Um, that was in the architecture that was needed to scale across a very disparate technological stack, and prepare to being able to take DoorDash level orders. And so one of the investments we had was $1 million from Microsoft, in development fees to really expedite building out that cloud architecture, to prepare for being able to take, really scale at a DoorDash level of orders. So it's been about, about 2.5 years since that pivot was complete, and we've really been able to go out there and as we talked, used to hit on KPIs a little bit, but we've definitely seen accelerated growth, over the last 6 months for where we started at the beginning of the year with about 300 live locations to, over 700 live locations now, in the very strong, pipeline, um, with 100% pilot to paying customer ratio. So everybody that started Curbit has become a Curbit customer, and we've actually had nobody leave us besides a restaurant that just went out of business on its own, nothing to do with Curbit. We haven't had anybody start Curbit and then leave because we become so integral to their operations.
Well, there's a lot to be said there because it's like, subscription businesses, that's churn is like a huge problem, right? And it's like you work so hard to get a customer, and then if they leave, you're kind of out of luck. So that says a lot about your product. And if you wouldn't mind, maybe just sharing like the types of like who Curbit is for, and then who it's not for, and also like maybe just share some of the types of the restaurants that are using it, and what their feedback has been.
Yeah. So, yeah, the great question. Who Curbit is for, so our ideal customer profile, at this time is restaurants that have kitchen display system. So they've already taken the resources and time, and they've got I guess, in understanding of how important kitchen optimization is, that they've invested in a kitchen display system. And that's important because that's what Kirby operates through, is a kitchen display system. And then locations that are, 10 or more. Now a McDonald's, a Wendy's, a Taco Bell, that's not a customer we're going after. They have it pretty well figured out how to operate their restaurant operations and a drive-through. So those level we wouldn't be. It's more for your medium size, restaurants in a market. Now we do have the ability, and going forward, and it hasn't been rolled out completely yet because we're focused on our current pipeline and rolling that out, but expanding to some of the smaller businesses that maybe can't afford a kitchen display system, but they have a Epson printer for their ticketing system. And we've now integrated with Epson, the Epson printer, as far as being able to help them with their order allocation. That's a future rollout, but it expands from even more than just like the 10 or higher. So that's our ideal customer profile. Now we've worked with, some of our restaurants that we have, and I'm just looking at the list because we're now in 23 brands, but um, Kava, Lazy Dog, California Fish Grill, or some of them. We've had a pilot going on with Dave's Hot Chicken. There's, Zippy's, Takaya, a lot of, Sharkies. Some of these are um, regional brands. You may be familiar with them, you may not, but I would say the majority of these, have dozens of locations. And then there are some who have even, obviously like a Dave's Hot Chicken, but there's Smash Burger, Pee Wee, Sharky's, which is a California Mexican grill. But those are our different, restaurants that we're in right now.
All right. And, what would you say are some of your maybe biggest goals, as we kind of look out, over the horizon? We've got about 4 months left in the year, so as you guys close out 2025, what are some of your most important goals? And then maybe like kind of moonshot goals or like longer term goals, as you look out, over the next 3 to 5 years, what would you guys like to accomplish?
Yeah, so our number one, goal by the end of this year will probably happen right after the beginning of the year, so first quarter of 2026. But with the momentum we have is profitability, right? And as we scale, we're able to bring down um, that the burn rate that we have for the cloud infrastructure, with just how that's set up with the variable costs with the COGS. So bringing down that burn rate is important, and then continuing to execute on our pipeline so that by the end of the year, we're at about 2,500 to 3,000 locations is what we assess as profitability. So that's the immediate thing, is getting to profitability and closing out the current round that we have today to support that continual execution. Over the next 2 to 3 years, it's really going out there and seeing I for the founders. And again, this is more obviously their strategy than me as an investor, but is for that exit in 2 to 3 years, finding that right partner that wants to purchase Curbit and sees the advantage of being able to provide the Curbit solution and have control over that early on. And we are in, conversations with some of our different partners that are understanding more and more, especially as we get closer to that 1,000 restaurant location mark. We're seeing, more and more interest in understanding of, oh, wow, this is really, it's critical, it's vital, and how do we get involved? And of course, with that short-term goal of getting to 2,500 locations. That's also when we get a DoorDash interest. They understand it, they see the value, but right, they're looking at hundreds of thousands of locations right on their app across the United States. And so you've really got to hit a number, a critical mass number that they look at and say, this is statistically significant, right? And so the closer we get above that 1,000, I mean, the more we get above that 1,000 restaurant mark, we see that as really the magic number that is going to start attracting like a DoorDash attention. Because when you think about DoorDash, their ETAs, they're only seeing the orders that come through their app. Uh, so when they're giving you an ETA, they're not actually understanding what's going on in the kitchen. So they can make their best estimate. They have pretty advanced algorithms of how they do that. But if you're not getting all the data and it's not real time, your algorithm is only going to take you so far. And I think we've all been there, and you alluded to this in the beginning of the conversation. We've all been there and looked at our made an order and just saw the ETA increase, or maybe the DoorDash driver is sitting there and saying, I'm waiting for your food. I'm waiting there for your food. Well, DoorDash perspective, that driver, maybe if they had an accurate ETA, that driver could have done several more, deliveries, not just been, waiting there. And I think we've all experienced getting, not quality food through DoorDash. And I can't, I don't have the numbers for how much they spend on this, but I imagine it's an enormous amount that you go to the help menu and say quality of the food, bad. And, you know, but a lot of people equate that experience to the restaurant as well. So it might be because of the DoorDash operation, but people blame it on the restaurant and the restaurant experience and maybe do not reorder when it's completely um, inaccurate. Or maybe the restaurant has, pushed out their ETAs just in general and not understood that they actually had the capacity to deliver and people pass on that order. Oh, I don't need to wait an hour. Well, maybe if that restaurant understood their actual capacity, they could have been given their accurate ETA of 20 minutes and that person maybe would have ordered. Yeah.
Yeah, I love what you're doing, man. I think I told you the story when we first connected that both my daughters work at a pizza shop locally, and I remember like I called up to order a pizza, and they're like, "Oh yeah, it's gonna be like over an hour." And even though it was like my daughters, and even though that's where they work, I was like, oh, I'm gonna go somewhere else. But
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
how do they know it's an hour? Are they making that up, or what? Like, where are they
Yeah.
getting this information? And I'm just guessing. And what does the person on the phone actually care? They just want this other person this to just go away, unless they're the owner, unless they get compensated based on like, hey, we made this sale and that sort of thing. Like, they just want the least amount of conflict as possible.
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, that they do make it up, right? For the most part, it is a made up number. It really, it's true. And I'm just honestly, I'm just lucky to have been able to get involved and really like form a friendship with Scott through the years and be able to observe what they were doing and understood it, and then also able to add, value to it. And I'm glad that, I'm really grateful to Scott and Kevin for seeing that I could kind of create value on the fundraising and strategic side because it's been one of my greatest learning experiences. Of course, I've got my, credit union job, which, I give my all to as well, but being able to, do this as well and be involved in develop a different, skill set has definitely opened up, other opportunities for me to help people with this type of fundraising. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Well, you're doing it all from investing to fundraising to, you know, helping grow a startup. It's like you're wearing a lot of hats, right? And so it's a great learning experience. And I can imagine, I mean, if you're at 700 locations now and 1,000 is kind of like where you said DoorDash you might get their attention, that could be like the end of the year, or it's,
Yeah.
so right around the horizon. Well,
And we've got a super strong pipeline, and right now it's just executing on that pipeline. And so that's been a great thing about the business model as well. And all the credit to Scott and Kevin for building these relationships with the different partners because it's really about relationships. I mean, these partners don't have to refer. They understand the value of it because it makes, if a Toast or an Olo or a QSR automations that are taking in and processing some of these orders, if they perform better because Curbit's working in the background, it does make their technology better, right? So they do have an incentive from that because people are like, oh, my Olo Toast, well, QSR, it's working great. Curbit's working in the background, but they do now get some of that credit for being able to offer Curbit uh, as a solution. And so there is a benefit for them, but it's also the relationships that were built with these different key players at this restaurant technology companies. And then, they're out there reselling, I'd say 90+% of our current partners have come from referrals, not having to go out there and really do door-to-door hard sales. It's been they've got a kitchen display system, so that's why part of the strategy is they need to have that because then they've got these partnerships. And then, oh, we have a partnership with all the main um, players that exist out there, and then they've been our referral engine, really dramatically lowering our customer acquisition cost.
yeah. Well, that's beautiful, man. Word of mouth.
Yep.
So what connections are most valuable to you? So like, so for the listeners, that are kind of listening to this or watching this, how can we help you? What connections are valuable? How can we help you move the ball forward with Curbit?
Yeah, so I mean, the main area right now is the focus on closing out the round, right? So if we've got any um, institutional size investors or uh, of course accredited, but bigger size investors that could come in and close out the round so that really it just becomes head down because how it is fundraising is, right? Fundraising is necessary beast. It has to happen, but it also, as much time you spend on fundraiser is less time that you can go out there and execute. And so really being able to close out this round and having introductions to people that not necessarily have to be invest, but have experience in raising money and maybe connections within that world, and that we can ask questions to, and they can impart some of their advice and make introductions, in that angel investing to, Series A investing world is would be extremely valuable. And really just the opportunity to be able to ask them questions, right? They may not be ready to invest at that time, but build a connection. Um, Expose them to Curbit and what Curbit is doing would be extremely valuable. And of course, any major chain type restaurants that really they're not the large national chains, but I'd say that medium, those regional players that aren't quite at the level of with McDonald's or a Taco Bell, but have a real regional strength that would be interested in improving their restaurant efficiency because when this is our lift is between 30 to $40,000 per location per year. And so if you're a restaurant with 700 locations and you're getting a lift of 40,000, when we already know the restaurant industry is so tight and being squeezed by so many things. Delivery has been great for exposure for restaurants, but delivery apps, that takes away profitability from already thin margins, which we all know exist in restaurants and why there's so many failures out there. But if you can get that amount of lift per location out there, that's extremely valuable for operators. And so if there are any, um, people in that area or that have connections into some of those regional players, that would also be really helpful.
All right. And what's the best way for folks to get in touch with you and reach out and also learn about more about Curbit?
Yeah, my email, daniel.bednar@curbit.com. That's a great way to get a hold of me. So yeah, again, daniel.bednar@curbit.com. And then from there, I can give you my calendar link and we can get something scheduled.
Awesome. And we'll also link to your LinkedIn profile and the website in the show notes so people can connect with you there as well and learn more about what you do. And awesome, man. It's been a fun conversation. And
No,
it's been fun watching your pitches each month and your progress as well. I think when you started the pitches, it was like 300 locations, and then your last pitch, it was 700 locations. So just the growth in that amount of time has been fun to watch. So,
no,
congrats, man.
yeah, no, thank you. And I've really appreciated the opportunity, Scott. It's been great getting to know you, and it's such a fantastic, group of people. If there's anyone that hasn't joined or hasn't sat in a pitch, I would encourage, you know, going and listening to them. And there's some great companies and great ideas. I've been amazed by the amount of stuff that Service Academy grads can do. And also it's a great exposure, especially for people maybe that are transitioning out of the military into the world and seeing like what one of the things I wish I knew, earlier, um, is just how many like about the journey of entrepreneurship, right? And how many opportunities out there exist in so many different ways. And so your group definitely does a great job of exposing people to that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being a part of it. And here's to an awesome finish to 2025.
Yeah, thanks, you too.